Chapter 1. As Always. Sarah? Alex jumped off the counter, but her expression showed more anxiety than it did excitement as she held her breath. She placed her hand on her heart, with the anxiety thumping through her chest. She tried to regulate her breathing, a futile attempt to relax. She breathed short, rapid breaths through gritted teeth. She held her left side after the jolt of pain in her ribs from jumping off the counter. We both looked around for several moments until she stared at me, awaiting my response. I rushed into the living room and turned off the music. The chill faded, and I slowly turned my head to the sides, looking for any visual signs of her. We listened without moving, breathing, or even blinking our eyes. The only sound was the sizzling sound of bacon coming from the kitchen. Alex turned her gaze away from me, and we both scanned the house without moving an inch. Both of us snapped our heads towards the basement, wide-eyed. There was a heart-dropping noise through the closed door. It sounded like something falling off a shelf and striking several other things on its descent until it settled on the floor. Alex walked next to me on my left side and whispered, "Oh, God, Toby, is it him?" I matched her tone. "I sure as hell hope not." I put my arm around her and onto her side. She flinched from the ache in her ribs. I pulled my hand away and whispered, "Sorry." She nodded her head. I whispered, "Get the dowsing rods." She tiptoed into the bedroom and brought the box to the dining room and set it on the table. She carefully reached into the box for the brass rods. The edge of one rod caught the edge of the box and dropped onto the table. My chest pounded and I exhaled. We stayed still, looking around with only our eyes. Creak. I turned my head to her. "That was me. Sorry." After a few minutes of calm, I walked in front of the stove, turned the bacon in the pan, and turned the heat down on the burner. I pushed the eggs around the pan, scrambling them, but still trying not to make any more sound than necessary. Alex kept looking around. She paced the house, looking into open doorways. She spoke from a distance, but I couldn't make out what she said over the sizzling eggs in the pan. I raised my voice, barely above a whisper. "What?" She walked closer. "I said I don't like it. I feel like I'm being watched." After looking around suspiciously again, I said, "I know. I feel it too." She walked over and leaned on the counter next to the stove. I glanced over at her when I noticed she was staring at me, expressionless. "What is it, Alex? What are you thinking about?" "Do you think he'll come back?" I dropped the entire spatula into the pan, took a deep breath, and looked up at the ceiling. I shook my head, and she touched my arm. Flashbacks of that day flooded my thoughts in an instant. The most prominent memory was of his strength. He was an unseen entity who threw me around the house like a couch pillow. He engulfed the entire house with blackness on a bright afternoon, and, to top it off, he was thoroughly crazy. I've never been as afraid as I was that day. My heart raced as my memory replayed the twisted notes of the Jack-in-the-Box. "Well," she urged. I exhaled hard, looked at her, and said, "I don't know, Alex. Let's hope not." Then pulled the spatula out of the pan with the tips of my fingers. I pulled a paper towel off the roll to wipe off the handle of the plastic turner. "Toby, what if he does?" "Alex," I said with a hint of frustration, "I enjoy this stuff as a hobby. It's not like I'm professional or anything." I turned my attention back to the frying pan, and she put her arms around me and onto my chest from behind, placed the side of her head between my shoulder blades, and said, "I'm sorry. It's just that you know more about this stuff than I do." I sighed, relaxed, and said, "I'm sorry too." She leaned around me to look at my face and said, "Will you teach me more? I want to understand." I still murmured, listening for additional disturbances in the house. "First rule, and you can never break this. Never summon anything. You don't have control over what you're bringing back. If you sense an entity..."